How's it going, everybody? You're listening to the Let's Talk podcast, the show that brings you the latest in relevant and current trends and conversations about our daily living, the Bible, and also some very fun and unexpected points of view. With your hosts, Joey Santos and Brad Wilson.
Hey, everybody. Good to have you back here for this podcast. It's good to be back. This week, we took a little break, a week break. I mean, it has been a busy summer, beginning of summer. This past Sunday was Father's Day. I hope everybody, enjoyed this 2022 Father's Day weekend. But, man, I'm here with my leader, Brad Wilson. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm just living the dream.
Living the dream. I mean, I'm telling you, you
probably
dream a lot.
No, but I'm trying to make sure, probably the fact that I said that is going to show up on some with these guys is one of my sayings. So I got to try to eliminate all my my trademark lines from this podcast.
You have a lot of sayings.
I know.
I mean, you probably it should have write a book.
I've been building these things pretty much since middle school, junior high actually. Back in the day, we don't go by middle school.
Quite a library.
It's
collection of Brad Wilson.
My brain's like a mental labyrinth. You just hope David Bowie doesn't jump up in there and like that movie and scare you.
How's your Father's Day?
It was like most Father's Days. My grill.
Okay. We have to do all the work, don't we?
Yeah, that's why I said it was I said on Sunday as a sweeping statement. I know some people will take exception with it, but I'm like, Father's Day to me it's Mother's Day 2.0. It's Father's Day is the Mother's Day Halloween costume. Mother's Day dressed up as Father's Day.
Do you know, I watching on the news kind of came up with this statistic that 2021 Mother's Day, the average family spent $260. And for Father's Day, it was $150.
Yeah, and the majority of that is meat they're going to grill.
So there you go. There you have a picture of it. Man, you're in a good season here. You're ending this conversation on Sunday mornings in the book of James. Like we could just literally close that book.
Yeah, we wrapped it up.
But you close with like a couple weeks talking about choices. Choices is a big deal, isn't it? Mm-hmm. What for you when it comes to regardless if you walk with God or not, what do you think the biggest challenge is for any person to make choices? What the challenge come from in making the right choices?
Well, you can't escape choices, and what you choose. I mean, really, in everything. We were even talking a little bit before today of whether it's your work life, whether it's your family life, whether it's your health, whether it's your entertainment. The choices you make are going to, there's really, I guess at the end of the day, there's really no such thing as an insignificant choice. So whatever you choose and the choices you make will continually, they'll just lead you down a path that you'll just they set up where you're going. So if you're someone that makes good choices, then it's going to set you up for success in other areas. I think about with my oldest right now is he with playing football and the commitment. So he can either choose to be committed and do the things that are required or asked of him for with playing football at Mason, or he can choose not to do that. And how it's like what sometimes people don't see is the choices, for him, and I encourage him with this, is the choices he makes on a daily basis right now. Those will pay off in the end of August and September when the season gets here. And I think sometimes that's the hardest thing with choices is the choices we make in the present moment. We like to choose things that will benefit us like right away. But often the most important choices, you don't see the benefit till further down the road. And I think sometimes that's why it's harder to make the right ones.
I know. I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking. I think that we overestimate our capacity to manage the consequences of our choices. So, because sometimes we're looking for instant gratifications in our choices, and we know the consequences that, in the long run, the choices are going to provide, are going to bring. We still feel like I can manage the consequences of my choice, which I think we overestimate our capacity to actually manage them.
Yeah.
And that's when we get in trouble.
Yeah.
We get the instant gratification, and then right after we learn, I may not be able to manage all the consequences of my choices. And then we try to find escape, right? We try to find a way out. Man, how do we avoid that? I mean, is there a way to avoid that? Are we using the wrong parameters to make our choices? Like, how we actually? What would be the roadmap here? After you taught that for 2 weeks, what would be the roadmap to start making good choices in our lives?
Well, I think from a spiritual standpoint, one of the things that just kind of popped in my head with this idea of choices is the beginning of Proverbs, Old Testament book. People say, I mean, it's a book of wisdom, is Proverbs 1:7, and it says that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and discipline. And so I think kind of what you're saying with choices and that jumping in part of choices is that there's and it's been around for the longest time. You can say, hey, this is a biblical thing, or you can say, man, this is just real life thing. Is like when you're talking about the instant gratification, the thing with choices is that the lack of wisdom or discipline, and especially in our culture and world today, those are two words that people don't want to have. So I think part of the struggle we have with choices is like, well, we can manage the consequences later, but also there's almost this idea today that discipline is a bad thing. And I think sometimes with choices, we have this expectation that even if I don't make the right choice, someone's going to be there to bail me out. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a shift that's happened culturally compared to, and obviously I can't speak for culture that you had growing up, but when you were the age of like your boys now, I was the age of my boys now, it seemed like the choices that there wasn't the bailout plan. There was no bailout plan. Depending on what the choice was, there was a discipline plan.
Yeah.
There was before I'd worry about the wrath of God, I was worried about the wrath coming from my parents. And so the solution for that wasn't in any area was, there was going to be some type of discipline, and there was going to be a price. Like I was always paying a price or dealing with the consequence, and I wasn't escaping it. No matter how hard I begged or pleaded or tried to work the situation. And I think now with choices, and not just with kids, but even with adults, is we don't expect. We just expect. Oh, all right, I made the wrong choice, and you're going to choose to be gracious, and you're going to choose to It's like Monopoly, get out of jail free card.
Yeah.
That's what it's going to be. And so I think that really makes it difficult.
I think you're right. It's one of those, back in the day, it was not what would Jesus do? It is what would my parents do to me if I do something wrong?
Yeah.
And I think really it prevents us from making a lot of bad choices because of the level of discipline and commitment that our parents had to the discipline and education and raising us. Definitely, there's a cultural difference from today, right? I mean, we see that. We see that in parents and many times, and you see in the kids, how kids behave. So absolutely, and I think that reflects in our relationship with God, because I think if we grow up if you're raised not understanding the value of respect, of the value of discipline, the value of, consequence of bad choices and consequence of good choices, of course, it's every time we make a mistake, it's like, oops, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Well, we'll try again. Well, hold on. The choices that you made caused this chain of consequences that now you have to deal with. And I think that's part of this. The challenge for this generation is I not only wanted the gratification, I don't want to be penalized by the bad choice I make. Well, that's really not how God works. I mean, if that happens in your life, the problem is that's not how God works, and God's very clear about that. Just to make clear, we're not talking about God's punishing people, right?
Correct.
We're talking about here is more in the sense of things going to happen, and you're going to have to deal with the consequences. God's not gonna bail you out of the consequences of your own choices. Now, God has a plan for you to grow through it if you are willing to listen to Him. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of what people need to understand. One, take responsibility, assume the consequences of your choices, but hold on, God's here to actually walk with you through this so you can grow from it. Is there very practical, biblical practical steps that we got to take to kind of get into this process, this journey with God when I make my choices?
What are you thinking by that? Of steps that make sense to when you're making choices, or how you
exactly when I make my choices. What's the Bible teaching us? What's the guidelines here for me to make my choices? And I think we got to be very clear, though. I think sometimes we say, well, the Bible has these guidelines we're going to follow, and few things going to happen. I'm always going to make the right choices. Second, I'm always going to deal with good consequences, and that's not true because of our nature. Right? Mm-hmm. So, but we have some guidelines that can help us to stay on track and not only guide us through making the choices that we probably need to make, but when things don't go the way we plan, we got the God is with us. There's a pathway to do the consequences. So that's where the question is coming from.
Yeah. Well, I think if you get to the choices of, and you think of choices we make for ourselves, is one of the most important things I think for us to understand is that, and we talked about this way at the beginning of this series in the first week, is that life's not going to be easy. There's going to be bad things are going to happen to us. Sometimes sometimes we cause that. Sometimes we get ourselves into that. Sometimes it reminds me of something that our friend Paul Carpenter talks about is, don't pick up other people's trash.
Yeah.
Sometimes our desire to do a good thing, we get into a situation, or we, quote him, pick up someone else's trash, and there's an effect that we didn't see coming, consequences, results to deal with it. But I think a big thing for us is that in the church, one of the myths that's out there is that, the closer I get to God, the more spiritual I become, the easier life will be. And that's not biblical.
Yeah.
And so I think one thing is important is have the expectations that sometimes we're going to face. James used a lot of words he talked about trials and tests. And sometimes these things, they're, instead of a bad thing, it's an opportunity for us to, God gives an opportunity to see, okay, where we're at, kind of on our faith journey, for lack of a better term. And these are opportunities for us to just become better, become stronger in our commitment, and it's an opportunity to develop our faith and work through that.
Let's talk about that a little bit, just quickly. Tell me about this, because this is a great point, and I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between temptation and being tested. Sometimes we say it's the same thing, and it's not the same thing, isn't it?
Right.
What's the difference between being tempted and being tested by God?
One, we know that and James talked about this, God's never going to tempt us. He's not tempted. He won't tempt us. We talk that often temptation, we tend to think, well, temptation then it's always from the devil or something bad. But there's a lot of times where temptation, it starts within us. It comes from us. Like there's these certain desires we have, and we're like, okay, this is something I think I want, and it leads us down there. But the temptation, to me, the big difference is temptations. The end result of the temptations and the process that takes us down wants to wreak havoc and destroy our lives. Testing, and because we see in the Bible that God tests his people. Testing is more about strengthening us, refining us. It's preparing us for the next thing. Like you think about school, or or sports, or whatever you're doing, is like when you go through this process, the idea of when we're tested in school is to see, okay, where am I at right now with my understanding, my knowledge, my insight with this, and the testing lets us know where we're good, but also where we need to improve. And so I think, like with God, where our faith and testing comes in, it gives us the ability to see, hey, where we're at this present moment, and kind of highlights how we move forward with it. Where temptation, man, all temptation, that's the beginning of a process. At the end result is just wants to destroy things in our life. So to me, those are the two big differences.
It is, and that's great. We're going to take a short break. We're going to come back, and we're going to jump into choices that lead into commitment. It's official. CC Life Plus has launched, and we truly feel blessed to be able to reach people in and through the new way of online living. What makes CC Life Plus even more special and better all around is that it is for everyone. This platform has kids content for students, podcasts, music, and traditional content to help you grow as Christians. So there really is something for everyone on here. We hope you have had a chance to check it out. If not, please do. We'll be adding new material monthly, and we'll post on the social media channels when we do, so make sure to subscribe and follow our social media channels so you know when new content is released. Oh man, okay, we're back. Let's just keep going and talk about choice. And okay, Brad, you talk about, how the choices that we make impact our commitment. One of the commitments that you challenge us in this message has to do with commitment to church. Now, here's a question beyond that is, what do you mean when you say commitment to church? Like, you're talking about Sunday morning church. You're talking about what is church?
Well, let's frame it up for people listening so they have contextually what we're talking about. Is we said last week we said that we talked about choices, the choices I make for others. And a big jumping in was, we talk around here is community. It was to choose community. And so we talked about there's certain things that take us, that cause us to miss community or not be able to function in community or experience community. And so one of the things we talk about is, okay, if we're talking about, at Christ Church, we talk about community begins here. We want people to, for some people, for the first time, to experience community with God and then community with each other. And so one of the things we said, okay, how do we experience that community? And is where you're going with this, is to be committed to your church. Now, that is you had some questions coming back from the weekend. That's a big that's kind of open ended.
Yeah.
Because for a lot of people, when they think church, their initial thoughts are going to be, well, this is just Sunday morning, which is true, but it doesn't encompass. I think as we're kind of getting into and moving into it, is there's a unique community that you're a part of most every weekend down at Church at the Bar. And that is a completely different community, a completely different feel from what happens here at the Mason campus.
Yeah.
But I think as we've talked a little bit about of being committed to your church, it's almost more of a, you got to take it from just it's more than just a Sunday morning commitment. Like it has to be something like we were talking yesterday and you brought up what we see when the church starts.
Yeah.
Is these people were, we almost have to think of church of less than the building and the structure where we meet for a couple hours on Sunday, and think of church in terms of the people that are a part of this.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where the commitment begins. Is we have to be committed to each other, and that just can't be for 2 hours on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think part of that is our habit, right? We create habits in our lives that it becomes embedded in who we are, and I think a lot of it has to do with sometimes the language that we use. So, for example, when Sunday morning comes around in our houses, we say, "Okay, let's go to church," right? So, when we're going to meet someplace, we're going to meet at the church building during the week for some kind of event. We say, where we're going to meet? We're going to meet at the church. That's the building. When I said we Sunday morning we go to church, that's the way we express we're going to go to our worship experience. But we say church. And there's many other expressions that we use in our daily lives that's what church means. And I think that kind of blur a little bit the real meaning of church in our lives, because it's hard for us sometimes to differentiate what is, the church the way Jesus really intended for us to be. I believe that. I think that. So I think when we talk about commitment to the church, and I know that in your heart, you want people to commit to everything that means church, the community, the obedience, everything that comes with the package of being a Christian, of being a believer, of being a disciple maker, everything that comes on that's the commitment. Let's unpack that in this next few minutes in terms of, when I'm committing to church here at Christ Church, when you say commit to church, let's unpack this. What it means for someone that's part of this family to say, I'm committed to Christ Church, I'm committed to church. What does it really mean?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's something I think we'd agree that, especially moving forward in culture today, we have to do a good job of unpacking that, because church it's become more, especially the past couple of years, it's become more than just what so many of us are used to. It's the building. It's what happens on Sunday morning. But you can almost take out the word, and that's why I like that we use the word community. And you could almost say you could add on to be committed to your church community, or be committed to your community. And to me, what it says of being committed to your church is there's a commitment to what we're doing. Like we talk about here the community, and one of the things that we're going to keep talking about more and more is we talk about groups and life groups and people you're involved in. And so being committed to your church, to me, a step with that is of more so than Sunday is getting into, and maybe you're someone that would create it, or getting into a community with other people that you're like, okay, hey, we're gonna be together, and we're going to challenge each other. We're gonna care for each other. We're gonna look after each other, and we're just gonna kind of operate and go through. People use the term doing life together.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like that's part of there's so many different, like you can take it on. There's so many different communities, but it's almost figuring a way to engage with each other on a daily basis, and not just Sunday morning. Because really Sunday morning is more along the lines of, and I think in the future, is how committed we are to each other as people Monday through Saturday. Moving forward is going to be, we're going to see the result of that on Sunday mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's almost going to be, like church Sunday morning is going to be the byproduct of what happens
Exactly.
during the week. And that's where I think for us, the jump has to happen, because as we've talked about groups, it's changed, and everything's just it's not the same structure we're familiar with.
Yeah.
Like for some people, like we've talked about, there's people right now that is figuring out, okay, how do we help people? How do we create a community for people right now that they're for the foreseeable future, maybe for the rest of their lives, their church involvement's going to be through the online realm. So how do we help to provide them, and what's, and I don't know if I have off the top of my head, is something to talk about is I don't have a great answer right now for, people in the online realm. How do we talk about being committed to your church? I mean, I think there's some definite things to work through, so we have a clear picture of what that looks like. Because I think that's one thing right now that, if we're being honest, that we're lacking. Of like, hey man, we're glad that you're here with us on Sunday, that you're checking things out, but how do we help to give these people that are with us, we even touched on the virtual world, but these people that are with us in the online realm, how do we help them, and what's legitimate, commitment to the church community look like in that realm? Because it's going to be different than in the physical realm.
I think it is, and I think that I think for people listening, I'm not going to assume they all know that we have the church gathering here in this building on Sundays, but then we have the gathering at the Monkey Bar, where I do the church the bar, and then we have online gatherings. The online we do via streaming. We're about to reshape that whole platform right now on how it works. But regardless, our goal is always to engage people. Has been always to engage people. We're not going to stop doing that. I think the difference for us is that, and I think we start to see the benefits of that, is that we don't attach everything to a specific form. Mm-hmm. Right? So, for example, the church at the bar, the gathering on Sunday doesn't look like anything what happens here in this building on Sunday morning. It's different. Why? It's made to fit that environment, that the crowd that goes in that. Again, our goal is the same. We don't compromise on a biblical truth. We don't compromise in the principles. We don't compromise in integrity, but we just adjust the programming, if you will. We adjust the gathering for that environment, what we do there. And I think that's the main difference here, that I think we're benefiting from. Being able to engage people. Like we had a great crowd. We had almost 40 people at the bar this past Sunday, right? So online, same thing. What are the things that actually going to speak to that audience? It's not, many times it's not the same thing that we do here. So how we actually, because what we want is connection.
Yeah.
What we want is connecting with people. So if I attach myself to how I do it, if I just gonna attach myself to how I do it, that becomes the main thing, and that's when I probably gonna miss a lot of connections because I'm more concerned about not what. I'm not concerned as much as about what, as I'm concerned about the how. See, I'm putting the how in front of the what and the why I'm doing. I think as church, in general, we gotta figure out how to do this right, and the how doesn't become as important anymore, right? So you talk about groups. Groups can happen in so many different ways.
Yep.
Groups can happen in so many different shapes and forms, and then we got to figure out as a church is, it doesn't really matter the format that the group is meeting. Is that more important than what they're doing and why they're gathering? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's good for our crowd, our people to really listen to this and start thinking about, what are the things that creates proximity between you and your neighbor? That's what's
Yep.
going to drive them in. That's what's going to cause them to come together, and you have the meaningful conversations that either going to lead them to Christ or you're going to lead them to a better discipleship experience. It's going to lead them into become a disciple makers. But I think many times we try to not rethink the things that actually need to go through the process, right? The Bible tells us about the renewing of our minds, and it's hard for us to do that because we like to settle on the things that work. This is working. Let's not mess with it. Now, I think we're in a phase in our church where we are being challenged to actually rethink many things because we start to see the things that actually it's okay to be different. It's okay to adjust. It's okay to be challenged on those areas that allow, okay, God, we're going to do the work here because actually this needs to look different. So it's okay to look at things and say, this may need to change. Do you think that becomes a challenge? Like in your experience, do you think that's one of the challenges we have as a church? Like this is a pretty honest conversation on ourselves. We're not talking about any other church. We're talking about ourselves.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a challenge for us now moving forward?
Yeah, because I think what sometimes gets lost with it is at the end of the day is it doesn't matter if we've got two services here in Mason. It doesn't matter if we have 800 people in both of these services. If we have 800 people in both of these services, on the outside that looks great, but I'm not interested in having 800 people in both those things committed to being in service if they're not committed to Christ. And so I think where a lot of this discussion comes in and with groups and community is what we've seen from this pandemic is we had a lot of people that were committed to what we define as the church and Christian experience. I show up on Sunday, I check my box, and I'm done. And what that reveals is maybe we weren't focused enough on being committed to Christ. Because at the end of the day, is the result, and what we want to do is we want to help people figure out how to get into a relationship with Jesus, because that's the only thing that matters. And I think that can happen within the church, but also I think where we need to change and think differently is for people when it says, man, be committed to church or be committed to Christ is getting people to wherever you're at. A lot of people are already in groups. And so for them, it's like, okay, how do I, as a Christian, as someone that's committed to Christ and a relationship with Christ, how do I begin to, in the group I'm already in or a group I'm already a part of, how do I change that from something that's, to steal an idea from someone I heard it with, the moment you kind of shift the focus from this and say, okay, hey, I get together with these people on a daily basis, and yeah, you're doing something that's secular, but the moment you shift and say, I'm going to figure out ways to bring Jesus into this group, then all of a sudden that group becomes sacred. And that's the thing sometimes we miss. Things can be sacred that don't happen at 5165 Western Row Road. The difference between something that's, maybe you use a term that's secular versus something that's sacred, is Jesus brought into the mix of it. That's why if there's a group of people, if there's a group of guys that you go down to Topgolf with all the time, hey, the moment that you begin to introduce, and not Bible thumping them, but introduce Jesus into the conversation, you're starting to take that group from something that's just secular to something that's sacred.
I know, and that's I like it. That's the challenge though, because the key word, the key phrase there is bring Jesus into that environment, and I really think that begins, that process begins with me. You see, the decision to bring Jesus part of that secular moment or not it's how I act, how I behave, what I'm doing. I think many times church listeners, church attendees, they're thinking that when we say, hey, at what moment you're going to bring Jesus to they're waiting like, okay, I'm waiting for the moment they're going to say, hey, let's talk about the gospel. Mm-hmm. Hey, let's change that approach and let's just live that out. Mm-hmm. Because I can be in any environment and I can make the choice at that moment. Am I going to be Jesus or not? Or am I going to be me? Mm-hmm. So the way I behave, the way I deal with conversations, to me, that's me making the choice to be Jesus. I'm bringing Jesus into that moment right there. And I don't care where I am. I'm with the ministry we have at the bar. I'm at the bar all the time, meeting people. It's my choice if I'm going to be just Joey or if I'm going to be Jesus in there. And that's how I bring Jesus into that into that gathering. So, yes, I think for people, not every gathering needs to turn into a deep Bible study.
Yeah.
The question to me is, are you ready? Are you ready to talk to your friend when they ask the question?
Yeah.
Because many times I think we dodge that question. I don't wanna be in this environment when my friend's gonna ask me about Jesus, because guess what? I don't know what to say. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what you say, fantastic. Don't worry about it. Guess what? Just be Jesus at that moment.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's been the premise of James' everyday living. I mean, that was the whole, we ended with the choice. So that was the whole thing with the letter, is he was instructing these people that how they handle the trials of life, how they handle the tests, how they interact with each other. And when we talked about favoritism, we talked about the tongue, what they say. Like you said, so often we and we don't realize this, we bring Jesus into situations before we even say anything about him. We bring him into the situation by how we treat people, how we interact with people, how we carry ourselves. Sometimes, like you said, with it is how you handle. Man, everyone's dealing with adversity today. Everyone's dealing with stuff seeming just falling apart. How we work through the struggles and issues and problems of life, man, that's a way to introduce people. Like as Christ followers, we should have more resolve, and our ability and how we work through these things should be different because we should have a different perspective from it.
Yeah.
And like you said, is often how we deal in those things, those are the things, that everyday things are what open the door for people to ask us at some point, well, man, so how do you actually do this? But if there's no difference in how we just live life normally, there should be, because of what Jesus means to us when he does in our life. But if there's no difference in how we live life and how we handle things, especially the trouble situations, then that's where we're missing the mark. Because to your point, it's we established that that's established long before we open our mouths and go Billy Graham Jr.
Exactly.
And if there's no difference in how we live our life and how we speak to people, what we say, how we conduct ourselves, then no one's going to sit there and our faith, they're going to be like, I'm not interested.
And you made that statement during the series. You said that this book, you talk about it. It's less about talking, and more about doing.
Yeah.
You talk about that during the series. Like, this is less about talking and more about doing. I think if people reflect on that, what kind of impact they can really make in their own circle of influence. Everybody's part of a circle of influence. Everybody listening is part of a circle of influence. So you look at your circle of influence and look at it, what kind of impact can you make just by the things that you do, how you behave, how you treat people, how you deal with conflict, how you affirm people, how you bring people up, how you build people up. The things that you do is what going to tell people who you really are. Mm-hmm. And your identity is just going to be revealed at that moment, not by what you say. So I think the opportunity is huge for us. We have a huge opportunity as a church to make an impact. And I think that's going to result into different expressions of worship in our lives. For some people, the expression of worship is going to be gathering in people's houses and being together and breaking bread and doing all the good stuff and growing together. For some people, the expression of worship is going to be here on Sundays and in other opportunities to be here. For other people, the expression of worship is going to come out as online and on communities. No matter where you are, again, no matter how you do it, the how doesn't matter. It becomes more about what and why we're doing what we're doing. So, dude, that was a great conversation, but we're going to have to go.
Yeah.
Our producer's just screaming at us right now on the other side. I'm so glad there's a glass between us, because this is about to get violent.
Yeah, he's going off like a Roman candle fresh bought.
I
had to throw one of those
Another
in there.
one. I'm just going to close right here. There's no reason. We'll be back next week. Good talk to you, dude.
All right, same.
Thanks for joining us this week on Let's Talk Podcast. Make sure to check us out at ccliveplus.com, where you can listen to past episodes and subscribe to the show in iTunes, Spotify, and other podcast platforms. And one more thing. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating on iTunes and tell someone about the show. Until next time.